That was the best background I can get. So it's still a little bit bright, but you know what? That's okay. So I was reading through between chapters 40 and 43. There's one scene in chapter 41 that was really touching. There's an interesting description of the sun, but we already covered that in chapter one. But it was really a callback to the prologue. The author did a really good job in chapter 41. So the chapters we skipped, chapter 40 to 43, mostly gameplay issues and whatnot, and then this is more drama filled scene. So that's the author teasing the science fiction background, and there's a lot of science fiction in Volume Two. Volume One is very set up, and then it only the Volume One is a bit slow, and it only, but after that slowness, it just really builds up really quickly. Past Volume Two, almost a little bit too quickly for my taste. Like a lot of people find Volume One slow. When you get to Volume Five, I kind of wished it was like Volume One. Yeah. This is chapter 44, a family, 第44章一家人. And then 周一 求搜 the beast looking for the collection or whatever on Chidia. It's interesting. Tyrant. When the forwards tomorrow hasn't arrived came out of Sumei's Blue Dynamic, Lu Yan's game backstage had skipped 7 or 8 passes within almost a minute. Basically, so many people like started to get buy the game. In other words, under Sumei's own efforts, she already assumed half of the sale of the game that is not. Oh no, not yet. Half of the sale of the game that's not coming tomorrow. Tomorrow has not arrived because before tomorrow there were only 17 copies sold, and the one that Sume had already bought was added. There are some cute interactions that happened in chapter 43, where yeah, you should read it for yourself if you want to know what happens there. Now, the girl first spent a lot of money and bought 10 copies of Amway to others. I never really knew what Amway was. I only read this in literature. And one on the Bilan group announcement. Only 1 minute more purchases of 7 or 8 copies. Is this what it feels like to be kept? Um, and that line reminds me of one of the dog short stories by Twitter, a writer that also posts some stories on Twitter called The Small Fiction. And he wrote something about like a dog um, finding happiness because he knew what it was like to be loved and kept. And it was really nice. Plus, being kept means to be to be raised, or not necessarily to be raised, but just to be taken care of, to be kept. At this moment, Lu's mother came to call for dinner again. Lu Yuan's mood eased slightly, and he replied and walked out of the room door. Regarding the game's release today, he didn't tell anyone, even Zhao Junli. It's the same to say that Lu Yuan is the largest shareholder of Tomorrow Digital Technology Company Limited and the only employee of Tomorrow Studio. In fact, he holds all the power of the company. Although Lu Dongming and Zhang Zhao Junli are also shareholders, but so far it's only a cent if there's money to be divided. If nothing changes in the future, this situation will continue. Because tomorrow's company cannot be a completely transparent company after all. Lu Yan knows that. Although his father returned, Lu's mother still rarely talks to his father, and they are still separated. After all, the damage his father caused to the family at the time was too great. My father had recently started looking for a job outside, but he didn't find a job teaching in a private school like what my father said. Recently, someone in his 40s went to the construction site and started working as a small job in the dark. It was proved by action what I said before. Very important scene. Like in the U.S., if or even in the U.K., um, if you need to work, the general thing is fast food, right? The service industry or whatever. In China or in Asia, which is probably an assumption, or in China, a lot of short stories say, "Go move bricks, go to construction. If you don't have a job, just go to construction, right? Because even like fast food, you need to have relationships." Fortunately, my father was just gambling, and he didn't hurt his body like other entertainment. So although he was tired, he was still able to do basic physical work. On the contrary, it was on the mother's side. Seeing her husband so tired, the heart was so hardened, it softened a little bit slowly. Although I didn't say anything, at least every day when my father came back for dinner, my mother would make a special meat dish to help my father. As for myself, since I've been busy with things that are not here for the past month, I haven't been out of the house much, and it's even more impossible to go to work like my previous life. However, my father in his first rental house seems really energetic. In just over a week, the originally loose and dry skin was tanned and smoothed by the sun. There are often red scars on shoulders and arms. Actually, my father hasn't done similar physical work since I was a child. but I've done it now and it looks like it. What Lu Yuan had been most afraid of is that even if he really brings his father back and can help his father pay off his gambling debts, but his father might still fail, and then Lu Yuan is really helpless. But his father did not disappoint Lu Yuan at all. After all, in Lu Yuan's childhood memories, his father had always been the one who supported the family. If he didn't go astray later, then Lu's family would still be a well-off home that others would envy. Originally, I could only watch the family gradually fall apart, and my mother was full of distress. Because my father was heartbroken, my mother never remarried for many years. As for me now, I finally have a chance to save it all. Today's dinner was shredded pork with green peppers, 青椒肉丝, scrambled eggs, 炸鸡蛋, oh, 西红柿鸡蛋, scrambled eggs with tomatoes, and served with rice. Both very traditional Chinese dishes. My father was obviously very hungry. After the food was prepared, he gulped it all down. Oh, there's another famous reference, which is a pleasant goat and big bad wolf, um, and how they got married. That's a very funny one. That's very very thing. Lu Yan glanced at his mother and saw that her mother did not eat. Instead looking forward to it. There are occasionally tears flickering in the corner of his father's eyes. Yes, when did my father suffer this kind of sin in his life? This kind of atmosphere was a bit infected by Lu Dongming. He ate halfway and saw that Lu Yue and Lu Mu didn't move the chopsticks much and waved his hands. Why don't you eat it? How can I not eat enough of your mother's taste? Furthermore, I don't have to do this for the next half of my life. I look forward to it slowly, and I can always find a stable job. But isn't my family in a hurry to spend money now? The wages on the construction site are still appropriate. If you can do something, just do something. Mother Lu's lips trembled, and Dongming, after a cry, my mother burst into tears. Lu Dongming looked at his crying wife, then looked back at Lu Yan. Lu Yan nodded to his father. Then Lu Dongming stood up and walked to gently embrace his wife. My family's together now. Isn't it enough? Okay, yes. If you don't like the drama, if that's not the drama for you, oh man, you guys, you're missing out. Trust me, it makes the second, third, fourth reading so much fun to read. Because a lot of books that you read the first time, yeah, it's an amazing first read, but sometimes it's very difficult. Because like I remember rereading Godfather of Champions, and that was a little bit tough because there are very scenes that because you don't know it, you kind of think. Plus, there's a lot of filler, but it's still good filler. There's like bad filler and good filler. I won't get into that. But it's not as interesting as this because these scenes they're just always so fresh. Um, Maybe not as fresh as initially as the first time you read it. Honestly, the first time you read it, you aren't even paying attention. I think it's like the second or third time that it becomes really fresh. But it really makes makes this book rereadable. Anyway, I'll continue on. The meal was a bit sad, but in the end, his parents finally showed signs of relief. Lu Yan was still quite happy. Lu Yan didn't intend to interfere too much in the matter of his parents. After all, they were both adults and had their own ideas and opinions. Lu Yan could never write to the emperor that you're too tired recently, like a courtier in ancient times, Chinese history. After leaving the harem in the cold, please give more rain and due grace, and give birth to a prince early. Yes, those ancient ministers even cared whether the prince emperor should sleep with his concubine. And Lu Yin didn't want to be such a minister, especially in the modern day. He only does what he thinks he needs to do, such as telling his father to quit gambling and bringing his father home. Returning to the computer table, Lu Yin could not help but feel even more relieved to see that the total number of games sold in the background has risen to more than 100. Su Mei Ho's voice is very useful, but next it's time to really look at the quality of the game. Lu Yin still trusts in the quality of Tomorrow Has Not Arrived. But right now, Su Mei has done live action, at least it claims to be so. Then Zhao Junli can't be dragged here. After all, Zhao Junli is a veteran game player, and Su Mei is also the object of Zhao Junli's attention. It's just that Zhao Junli did not know that Su Mei was Suno. But seeing that Tomorrow hasn't arrived, although this game is meaningless to him, because the original version with full screen is installed in his computer, and the official version is actually still on Steam. Because the original version with full screen is installed on the computer, and the official version that's sold on Steam is actually the castrated version or the downgraded version. But there's no motivation to transfer this to Zhao Junli. After all, when it comes to going to the horizon, this game is also Su Mei's first gift to himself, which is of great commemorative value. So Lu Yan bought himself another copy on the platform and packaged it to Zhao Junli. Tomorrow hasn't arrived for sale today. Please appreciate and play with shareholders and friends. After doing all this, Lu Yuan refocused on the Bilan website. Now that the game is on sale, Lu Yuan only needs to receive feedback on the bug. The Transportation Committee programming skills are the world's first, and there should not be many bugs. For other game companies in the next 2 or 3 years, DLC should be released to collect money. I'm not gonna mention any companies because I don't want to get in that hot water. But I bet you the comments definitely do. It's just that Lu Yuan doesn't have the time. His time is more urgent than most people understand. After tomorrow hasn't arrived, if the performance is normal, then the next step will be to try and make a VR version and completely expand it into an online game. At this moment, the dynamics of Bilan's website jumped again. The live situation of Sume was finally released. Tomorrow hasn't arrived. The End of Earth's Journey, Episode 1. And as you can see, it's a lot of references to some of the earlier chapter titles, because that's a title of the prologue, or chapter 1. Fascinating, fascinating, fascinating. So yeah, what is that, chapter 44? I believe that's chapter 44. Yeah, so there's some interesting dog food and drama parts coming up. Oh shoot, 42 did have an interesting foreshadowing, or it foretold of an interesting future. Really? Okay, I'm gonna have to reread chapter 42 to see if I need to publish, because I'm looking at my quotes document, and dang, there was an interesting, but it's such a small detail. Um, but yeah, I'll let you guys. You should definitely read it for yourself. Next chapter should be some dog food, and I'm gonna feed that to everyone. So yeah, thanks for listening in.